Omer told me before that he did it without a microphone, and that if I'm still young and powerful and mighty, then I'm going to be able to do it without a microphone.
He said to your defense that there were fewer people here when I gave a speech. So.
Yeah, or the other way around. When you said no, they wanted to hear it, so they were doing emails, and now they're just so focused. And so I became executive in the company, the acquired my company. Then I ran a few of the other companies, including 888. And then from that point onwards, I started investing in companies. Now, I started investing in companies around 13 years ago by having a day job. When a friend from my squadron came to me and offered me to invest in his venture, I liked it a lot. I gave him $25,000, which was all I could afford at the time to give him. And basically, this came back as a check for $400,000 after a year. And I said, well, that's a good deal. Then I took all that money, invested it again in companies. The second one was a company called Kenshu, which some of you may know, which is a marketing automation company. That's now, I don't know what it's worth, but it's been very good because when Sequoia invested in it, they bought some of our shares, so I got another large check. And the rest of the history, I continued investing. When I left 888, I decided that I was about to take another CEO position. But what happened then is that one of the companies that I founded and invested in, called Playtika, or Playtika as some of you call it, got sold. It was a funny deal because we sold the company for around $150 million 8 months after we founded it, which was pretty fast. And that was an amazing deal. It was also the worst deal because clearly now, 4.5 years later, it got sold for $4.5 billion. And so I was also very stupid and smart at the same time. And when people ask me how bad it feels, I say, well, usually if your best deal and your worst deal are the same deal, you're probably okay. And so I'm okay. And I continued investing over the years, and then in the last 2 years, I basically, 2.5 years ago, I set up an accelerator in the Silicon Valley that takes Israeli and American companies. It's called NFX. It's today perceived to be the best boutique accelerator in the Silicon Valley. And then basically what we're going to announce soon, which we haven't yet announced, is that we're basically raised a large fund around that that's going to also invest in non-accelerator companies. And so right now I'm involved both in Israel and the Silicon Valley. And I've invested in everything you can think of, like AI and robotics and marketing automation and SaaS and whatever, B2B and B2C. But my field where I've enjoyed the most, but kind of the secret is that I don't try to tell anybody, clearly not that big a secret if I tell you, but the secret is that the field also where I made the most returns is actually games. And so gaming has always been my passion. I've been a gamer ever since I remember myself. When my first job as a kid was basically coding Commodore 64 games and selling them to kids in the neighborhood. And over the years, this continued being something that I continued doing. With time, of course, less coding, but continuing to play games. And over the years, I've invested in some 15 games companies. Some of them you might have heard of. So I've founded and invested in Playtika. I was the first investor in Clarion, you might have heard of. I was the first investor in a company called SpaceSafe that Supercell acquired. I was the first investor in a company called Pacific Interactive, which was House of Fun that Playtika acquired. I was the first investor and actually founder of Rising Tide that Zynga acquired. I was the first investor in a company called Big Blue Parrot, which Playtika again acquired, and I'm probably forgetting a few. And so this has always been one of the areas that I like most. And clearly, I've invested in the years that rode the big game push around Facebook and then around mobile, and we can talk about that. But it's always been a very good industry for me and one that I like. And I continue to invest in the company. I'm still investing in quite a few of them, but the ones you may know is Moon Active that you may know. That's doing really well. A company called Beach Bum that's doing really well, and a bunch of others. And so it's been, I think, in terms of returns, it's been a phenomenal play for me, which is why I think I'm probably one of the only investors I know that continue investing in games. And we can talk about that, because right now it's probably the toughest time to fundraise in games in history. Right? And I can explain why, and I can share with you what's happening when I'm sending really good companies to investors and why they're pushing back on it. But it's actually now a tough time. More of you are working in startups, meaning games companies that would still need to raise money in the coming period. Nobody? No startups? Okay. Okay, good. So you don't care about that. So what you care about is why you're living in a great time, because all these small competitors that could eat your lunch can't raise any money, right? So basically you need to hear about that. And so what I've been asked to talk about, and we don't need necessarily to talk about that because I'm here for you. And so whenever you want to stop me or ask questions or discuss something, we can do that. But what I want to start with is like the few concepts around how do you invest in games. So again, one last question for you guys. Who is here been a founder of a games company? Okay, one over there hiding. That's not that embarrassing, it's okay. Okay, so that would mean that I will talk about it a bit differently. So my background in the games industry, we spoke about that. So why invest in games? And I get this question quite a bit because, as I said, the common perception is that you don't want to invest in games as venture capital. You don't want to invest in games as an angel. And the reason is the same reason why, and I immediately relate to that, because when somebody comes to me with a movie and says, hey, I've got this great script for a movie, and I'm going to produce it, and I want you to invest in it, my natural response is twofold. The first thing, I heard that all rich people were once very rich before they started investing in movies. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that statement that people really believe in, which is movies is a hit-driven business. What does that really mean? What it means is that me as an investor, I'm looking for something where there's a structure and a methodology around being able to understand what's going to succeed and what's not. And once you're titling something as hit-driven, what you're basically saying, that's out of this realm. What you're basically saying, which I think is bullshit, what you're for movies maybe, but for games, and I'll explain that. But what you're basically saying is, hey guys, after you're going to work really, really hard on everything, there's a bit of fairy dust that either somebody sprinkled on it or not. And if you don't get the fairy dust, then it doesn't matter how professional you are, you're not going to be able to make a hit game, which means that your company is not going to be great, which means that me as an investor, I'm not going to get great return. So thank you, here's the door, come talk to me when you create a SaaS company, right? Don't kill your soul, go create a SaaS company. And the point is that the theory stands. The theory stands because in each one of these games companies that I invested in that succeeded, there was a bit of that fairy dust, right? And you all know that. And we all know that there are companies that include great people, but they're just not that flair that makes it successful. And so the concept in general is the following thing. You can't invest in games because they're hit-driven. And the only VC-worthy game investment is a company that not only succeeded once with one game, but actually proved that it can succeed on multiple games. Because in the VC mind, it's only the repetitive nature of being able to create more games that makes this a valid venture investment. Which is why what we see is the following thing. At the growth stage, which is usually after a company made a few successful games, it's relatively easy to raise money based on numbers. So there are a bunch of investors out there that basically know how to analyze your numbers, which is not, we all know it's not that easy, but it's not that difficult. And you come to them with your games, and they look at it and say, okay, we see game number 1, we see the matrices, we see what you've done, we see game number 2, we see that you know what you're doing, and so we're willing to invest in helping you scale up and create game number 3 and 4 and 5 and so on. And for that, you'll find that almost every fund has at least one partner. I mean, the large funds, the ones that have money for growth investments, has at least one partner that's kind of always dipping their toe and trying to find the right game scheme. Okay, what's the problem with this strategy? As most of you know, it's pretty simple. Once you have the second successful game, who wants to go to an ABC? Right? It's like you need to be in a very awkward position if you've got 2 successful games and you can't deal with it either by self-financing or by finding a debt partner, someone who's giving you money to scale up without needing to give away equity. And so for the last few years, what happened is that all these people that wanted to touch games but wanted to do it late stage, they were left with no deals. And usually when they find deals, they're either bad deals, or they're deals where somebody in the company has this huge desire to create a multi-trillion-dollar company so badly that they're willing to sacrifice equity for funding. And we've seen a bunch of these. So, the Kebab story is a story like that, right? The company was successful, was profitable, but in their desire to continue growing and growing and taking over the world, they ended up taking more and more and more and more money. At the end of the day, most of the people in the company that invested early on hardly made any money, right? So I really do not recommend taking, hundreds of millions of dollars for a games company. That's really, I don't recommend it for any company, but definitely not for a games company. And so that's the higher end of the market. And then as you start going down, what happens is that what you're betting on is less and less the actual numbers, and more at the end of the extreme, like at the seed stage, just the team. And as you're betting just on the team, this is becoming tougher and tougher for investors. It's becoming tougher and tougher because when you look at the team, you have no idea whether this team has a pouch of fairy dust or they don't. You also don't know whether they wasted all their fairy dust on their previous game, which they did in another company. But when we look at all the seed investing that happened in the last few years, and again, there's always the old angel that puts money something. When we look at the serious few $1 million investing into seed games companies, what you'll find out is that all of them were people that basically had games companies before the first recession. Because at the early stage, the only thing you can do is bet on the people. The only way to bet on somebody in the games industry is to choose somebody that wasn't in the games industry. So even when I look today at my last few games investments, so a company like Beach Bum, that was founded by Uri Shah, the founder of Playtika. So he's the guy, he's the creative talent behind Playtika. And I'm willing to back him every day and every night because I know that the guy's a creative genius, and I know that he understands the player's mentality and the player's psychology more than anybody else. That's why Playtika succeeded in a genre that existed for years before without any years successes. Okay, there's a team in New York called Mitosis Games, and they're basically the team that founded Rising Tide, and I'm investing in them, and I invested in them because I know what they've done before, and I know what they've done. But what I'm trying to tell you is that, first of all, you've got to understand why investors are not putting money into this industry. You've got to understand, you've got to be empathic to their concerns because they're real concerns. And so if any of you ever goes out and tries to raise money in this industry, you need to understand what's blocking them. You need to understand why it's so difficult to make that decision. Now, why am I investing in games? So the reality is that while, of course, complicated industry and tough and all the things we said, it's also the most rewarding industry to invest in. Because despite the relatively low exit multiples, and I don't know if you guys know, but most exits in the game space used to be around 6-7 times EBITDA multiple. They luckily went up over the last year to 2 years to around 10 to 12% multiple. But just that we understand, SaaS companies often exit at 10 to 12 revenue multiples. Okay, so we're talking about a really, really huge difference in valuations between SaaS companies and games companies. And the reason that's the case is because, again, the investors, the buyers, are looking and saying, we're not sure that we understand the sustainability of growth of that particular company. So we're looking at the current games, we're looking at the present value of what they're doing, and then from then on, we're kind of putting some value on what they can create in the future. And so while the valuations are not very high on a multiple basis, there's no other industry in the world where you can scale revenue so far. So when I look at every other field that I invest in, and I said I invested in quite a few of them, there's no other field where when you get it right, the pool you get from the market is higher, stronger, faster than anything else. And so, the fastest growing companies in other fields that I invested in probably grew around, 1/5 the pace of the top games companies I invested in. And the reason, of course, is all the things that we know, that when you get it right, there's unlimited demand for the game. When you get it right, there's a lot of word of mouth around the games. When you get it right, monetization is like unbelievable. right? People are spending huge amounts of money. Nobody outside the industry understands how much. When you get it right, people are hooked to your game. I don't like using the word addicted, but they're very hooked to your game, right? They can continue playing forever and ever and ever and ever. You know, I don't think that many people outside the industry recognize that, you know, all the good games have like, you know, 10 sessions a day, more than an hour of gameplay, and, you know, tens of cents an average a day, but tens of dollars for the big customers. Right? Nobody knows this outside the industry. So once you understand the power of these games, once you understand that they're basically the fastest growing creatures in B2C, and the fastest growing creatures ever, and they're going to continue being the fastest growing creatures. Once you understand that, you understand that it's a great investment thesis. So that's one reason. The second reason I continue investing in games is that what I found out is that my investment in games and my ongoing connection to the game industry make me a far better investor in every other field. Because the reality, and again, you know, you go to talk to people in other companies that are non-games companies, and they gotta say, well, games, who cares? You know, it's not very interesting. The reality is that what I do every few months, I take a CEO from a non-games company, and I force them to spend a day or two in a games company. Because what happens is that they come up with a totally different mindset. They come up with a totally different mindset because there's no other industry that's focused on numbers, on performance, on optimization, on returns, on the thin balance between numbers and creativity as the games industry. And when people tell me that that's not true, I ask them one question. What other industry do you know in the world that measures themselves by daily revenues? Right? So, you know, I go to other industries and I ask how much money you're making, and they're like 200, and I say, wow, 200 a day, that's amazing. They're like, oh no, a quarter, a month, a year. And the fact that we're so tight on the numbers, the fact that we're constantly looking to optimize them, the fact that these companies need to combine in them today, both great product skills and great creativity and great customer understanding and great psychological understanding of the psychological drivers of the customer. But at the same time, these companies have got to be great ed tech companies, and they've got to be great data science companies, and they've got to be great optimization companies and great CRM companies. And because that's, and even great customer support. Because that's the case, what I find is that being at the cutting edge of games makes me far better in everything else I do. And that's why, as I said, I send CEOs to visit games companies. So, A, best returns still, despite low multiples. B, I think it makes me far better. The next thing is that I think that my skills in games, so you know, the world progresses, again, step backwards, the world progresses in what's called platform revolutions. And these platform revolutions are basically new hardware platforms that allow new things to appear in our lives. And you know, radio was a platform revolution, and television, and personal computers, and mobile, and social, and so on and so forth. And each one of these new platforms has, after it's created, it has a new ecosystem that's created on them. And this new ecosystem basically has, first and foremost, big things that are born on them that are platforms. So, you know, so Google was a platform on the web, and Facebook essentially became a platform on mobile, Creative became a platform on mobile, and so on and so on. And when I look at this, all my investment thesis in the future, a lot of it relies around these new platforms that are coming, which are AR and VR and voice-controlled web and AI and a bunch of others, like synthetic biology and 3D printing and robotics, but they're going to have less games, hopefully. And when I look at these new platforms, the one interesting thing is that for centuries now, well, centuries, tens of years, there has been two fields basically that always dominated new platforms before anything else: games and adults. Okay, so every new platform that emerged, basically games and adults were the main drivers because they are the skills. I don't do adult, I don't believe in this industry. And games allows me, in each one of these new platforms that emerge, it allows me to feel the platform better than anything else. And so I'm invested in a company called Volley. Volley is a company in San Francisco that is the #1 company right now in games over Alexa. Right now, not being #1 in games over Alexa still means like 200,000 games a day. I mean, that's all, it's nothing. But they're at the forefront of what's happening there. In my understanding today of the Alexa ecosystem, and the Alexa customer behavior, and the Alexa potential is 10 times better, if not more, than anybody else I know, because what I have is an insight to a games company on that. And so every one of these new domains would see games as one of the first thing emerging on them, and that is, for me, a critical thing in maintaining my knowledge, my know-how in each one of these domains. It also means that if I find the first ones, the really great ones that are first, the returns are probably going to be great, right? So when you look at the first games company on Facebook, like the first serious one, that was Zynga. And we may not like what happened with the share afterwards, but it was a great story for a while. When you look at the winners on mobile, these are multi-billion-dollar companies, right? Great companies like King, like Supercell. And on each one of these new platforms, there's also going to be multi-billion-dollar companies that are going to emerge on games. Now, it's still not there because the platforms are not as available as they should be, VR and AR and voice and so on. But I'm sure it's going to get there, and so that also gives me another reason to invest in games. And then the last thing, of course, is that games is fun to invest in. So I've got 3 kids. All of them like playing games. And there's nothing more fun than them saying, "Daddy, why are you playing games and we can't?" And I'm saying, "Kids, I'm working." Do not bother Daddy, I'm not working. And being able to tell this to my wife is even better. And those that know her would understand what a big thing it is to be able to say something without her being able to say something back. So that's why I invest in games. And I still think, despite what most investors think, I still think that it's a phenomenal investment thesis. Because if you know what you're doing, and we're going to talk about it in a second, it is probably one of the areas where you can bring the most returns at the least risk. But you need to pay attention to a few things. So that's enough. One last thing, of course. One of the reasons why I've had such a great time investing in games is because, guess what? Nobody else wants to invest in games. And so I chose these games companies from hundreds of game companies that I saw over the years. Clearly I missed a few good ones, not many, but I missed a few good ones. The main one I missed is that in 888 we had the opportunity to buy King for $10 million. But that was before they went into casual games. It's a long story, but Ricardo will confirm it. And so the reason that I get such great returns is because I can basically pick whatever I want. So in every other field, if there's a great AI investment, then I'm fighting Sequoia and Greylock and everybody else in this investment. If there's a great games investment, I'm usually leaving around. And they're kind of coming to me and saying, "Could you help us bring other investors because nobody's interested?" And then I need to go and explain to people why it's the right field. So that's why I invest in games. The next question is, what are the right ingredients for games venture? That's a tough one. Because clearly there's one ingredient, which is this fairy dust that I mentioned before. But I think that what I'm looking for in the games company today is something that I learned over the years to start looking also in other companies. So the world in general, in investing, is split into 2 types of companies. One type of companies are what we would call the product Silicon Valley focused companies. And that would be a company like Facebook, or a company like Twitter, or a company like many others, which are companies where the common belief is, if you build it, they will come. What does that mean? If you build a great product that usually has a network effect in it, then all you need is somebody to pick it up. Everything else is going to happen on its own. So when you look at these companies, their marketing budgets are close to 0% of revenues. Because the product is great, because people come to get the product, and the entire Silicon Valley mentality is that. And that's one type of companies. Thank you. There's another type of companies, which is, we would call the direct response, hard-hitting, optimizing companies, which are, if you wish, the ad tech industry in general, the gambling industry, the forex industry, the payday loans industry, and even the e-commerce industry, where essentially you hardly care about your product. Of course you do, but you care about the product because it improves conversion. And so your entire analysis of what you're building is what's going to give you the best ROI. And these two worlds hardly ever meet. The only place where they meet is in the games industry. And that's why great game teams are so hard to find. Because if you have only one of the two, it's almost impossible to succeed. And so if you're only great with product, and you only create games that indulge people, and everything's amazing with them, then guess what? The most indulging game is the one where you don't need to pay anything. Right? You just continue playing and have fun. But even if you put this aside, if you do not know how to optimize and pound and grow and market and make sure that you've got the right ROI, then what you have is something that you can see some of the Nordic game companies, which are phenomenal companies with phenomenal understanding of the customer spirit and phenomenal understanding of what people want, and great art and great creativity, but zero monetization, which of course is tough to maintain. If on the other hand, you're just a hard-nosed, hard-hitting optimization company that doesn't have any of the creative flair, any of the product elements, then you're never going to succeed, right? Because your product's not going to convert people well, and retention is going to be down, it's going to be low, and so on. And so almost the only industry that enjoys or requires, because it's a bad thing, that requires both of these skills to succeed is games. Of course, I'm exaggerating, there are a few others, but the one where it's the most apparent is games. And in games today, when I look at teams, what I'm trying to find out, and I have it in all the games companies I invest in, I'm trying to find out who in the founding team is a creative talent, the one that believes that the product needs to be amazing, and who in the founding team is the one that believes that money needs to flow in, and that everything needs to be optimized, and that there's a number attached to every action of the company. And it's that tension between creativity and optimization, between indulging and monetizing, between being pro player and being pro the player paying, which creates the best games companies. And so when companies come to me today, if I can't find that mixed DNA in them, which by the way is very difficult to find, if I can't find that mixed DNA, it's almost impossible for me to invest. Because again, as I said, if I only see the creative flair, that's not going to be enough, and if I only see the drive to succeed, that can't be enough. So that's one thing. The second thing is that I think that there's a misconception that games entrepreneurs are not necessarily the best of talent. And what I found is exactly the opposite. What I found is that, right, it's an amazing industry, but this is such a competitive industry with such unique requirements that if you don't have top talent, then your chances of succeeding are going to be very, very low. And I've seen this again and again and again. I've seen companies that are okay-ish in their talent, and they would say things like, I don't need the best data science like Amazon does, right? And this is bullshit. If you want to succeed, if you look at the best games companies today, the talent is as good as the talent as anywhere else in the top tech companies in the world. And if you want to be able to iterate fast, and to optimize fast, and to capture data in a way that will allow you to basically grow your company, you really need top talent. And this is something that really, in more and more games companies, I see this, okay, we'll outsource to somewhere, and it's going to be okay, or we're just going to put more people on it. It's not the same. It's not the right thing. If you want to build a game company, you've really got to have a top, at least the core of the company will be top talent, because that's what will make you succeed. So that's the second thing. The third thing is maybe the biggest secret that I see in games companies, which I think over the years I've had many, so Robert, the current CEO and co-founder of Pictica, and Uri, we're good friends, and we still meet quite often. And what I've tried to understand over the years is what made this company what it is now. Because I was part of it, I was close to it, I tried to understand. And what I found out over the years is one thing that basically differentiated the Playtika from many other companies I was involved in. And that was a very important woo-ha moment for me that I understood something. And that is, many games companies get their move. If I get 2 moves for every move of the Grandmaster. And so if I get 2 moves, I can beat everybody, anybody. And startups, again, large companies, the same thing. They have more engineers, they have more brands, they have brand power, they have more channels, they have everything, they have more money. But if the startup moves double as fast or more, then the startup can win. And when you look at, Israel is very famous for kind of deep tech exits. And you see all these companies, Cisco bought you over here like 15 companies. And they're all big companies in the core area of Cisco. You look at it and say, how can it be that 5 kids from Israel beat Cisco in developing another optical router or something? And the answer is speed. And I want to tell you a funny story about 2 friends of mine that started the company around 4 years ago with photo sharing. It was the time of photo sharing. And one of them started in one of the largest telcos in the world. And the other one started as a startup, and they know each other. And I said with both of them, and the guy that came from the telco said, I'm going to kill you. It's going to be so funny because I've got all these users. So of course I'm going to be pre-installed, I'm going to be great, and you're going to have a tough time. And half a year later, the guy without the large telco raised some money and was working and was growing, was good. And the guy inside the telco shut down the activity. And I asked him what happened. He said, well, it started by me knowing what team I wanted from inside the company. And so I had to submit the request for them to be transferred from their current position to another position. And in doing that, what I needed is that I needed to give them what's called an internal notice, which is 3 to 5 months, depending on the importance of what they do. So it took me 4 months to get my team. And then he said, I wanted to start coding, but we just invested $2 billion in our data center that we're going to set out, the cloud infrastructure that we're going to set out to our customers. And so I can't go out and spend money on other people's cloud. So what I had to do is I had to go to the internal committee that approved the usage of our internal storage for our external storage for internal projects. And that committee meets once every month. And the first month I came to them, I didn't present the business case right. And so they sent me to come back to the next one. So for 2 months they didn't have servers. Clearly the guy on the outside had a team in 2 days and had Amazon up and running in 1 hour. And so speed is the only way startups can win in general. And in particular in the games industry, speed is even more important. And so when I look at the team, other than the creativity and the abilities and the understanding that you need to be monetizing in parallel to creative and all of that, I'm also looking for the speed of the team. The ability to iterate fast. The ability to put out a version twice a day. The ability to basically learn from data all the time, iterate, not be married to long versions that take 2 months, and that then you put them out, they have many features, and you don't know what worked, and you don't know what didn't work, and you have to roll them back. I see many people nodding. That's very sad. But I'm looking for the teams that understand that the way to fight this battle is one battle at a time, one fight at a time, small iterations, small versions that you put out every day, that you test, that you constantly keep on iterating, that you decide what's important and what's not. And then once you decide that you've concluded something, because you understand that the KPIs are good enough, you move on and move on and move on. So that's really important now in how I develop the speed of the teams. The second thing is, so that's the pre-playable stage. The second stage is the playable stage, when there's something to play with. At this stage, what I do is basically, I look at the team, of course. So in every one of these stages, I do everything from before and I add something on top of it. And so for me, to invest in a games company, if there's something playable, I would play the game for at least a week. Now, I would understand that maybe there's not enough depth, maybe the content's not there, but I would want to see two things. I want to see that they understand the core game loop, they understand what is the core activity that I'm going to be doing, and that they've built it in a way that captures my desire to do a repetitive action again and again and again. Right? So the repetitive action in a Clash Royale is the fight, and my son can sit all day long and do the same fight again and again and again, even if he can't get any chess because his chests are filled. But he enjoys the core game. He plays it again and again and again and again and again. so do I. And the second thing I want to see, I want to see that they have an understanding of metagame. I want to see that they basically understand that today there's no game that succeeded because of the core game loop. There's no game out there that was ever in the last few years able to monetize because it was a great core game loop. And if you couldn't find out the right metagame, you couldn't find out the right concepts of the metagame, you couldn't basically serve enough psychological needs of the user in the metagame, because the core game loop is around the short loop addiction. This is this action which is repeatable, which of course slots is the most extreme of them. I click and I watch. Okay, very, very intellectual. But also, each one of the other games you can think of is basically the same thing. So other than, than sophisticated skill games, when you get into a Clash of Clans fight, it is a slot machine. And the slot machine is basically the slot machine that decided which player you're going to play with, because everything you're going to do with the game is not really going to impact. So the game's maximum outcome has been preset before it started, and you can only make it worse by playing badly. Okay? Same thing with Clash Royale, same thing with many of the other games. And so I want to see that the core game loop has that repetitive slot machine kind of attraction. And I want to see that the metagame has an understanding of the psychological drivers, which are usually progression, achievement, recognition. Okay, these are the three. I want to progress, I want to achieve something, and I want to be recognized. And so when it's at the playable level, I want to see signs of goals for both of these, the core game loop and the metagame. The next stage, which is the stage in which I like investing in games companies the most, of course, is the KPIs. Once the game is out and there are numbers, clearly it's much easier for me to understand whether I want to invest in the game or not. And here's one thing that you need to understand. KPIs are gold. KPIs are uranium. KPIs are the most important thing that you as game executives or founders or whatever can have. And I can tell you tons of stories, some of them I can't mention names because they're like kind of industry secrets, of those defining moments when people basically understood suddenly that something in their KPIs is wrong by hearing something from somebody else. Okay? In Playtika, I have to admit that the defining moment, for example, or one of the defining moments, was when I sit on the Facebook Advisory Council at school. I went to a meeting in Facebook, and I got from Facebook, for the first time ever, figures about mobile games. This is years, nobody had mobile games, but just the beginning of it. And I thought that on Facebook, we were like killing it, it's amazing, and nothing's ever going to be better. And then I met in this Facebook meeting somebody that was telling me, stupidly on his behalf, but was telling me a few of the KPIs of their latest of their newly released mobile game. And I remember stepping out of the meeting and calling the founding team and say, guys, drop everything you're doing. We're on the wrong platform. Because that understanding at that moment, which of course that's a big example, but imagine that you don't know what's your core KPIs for your game. Not that you know for your, but you don't know for your genre. Imagine that you're now doing a Match 3 game, and you're getting 30% day one retention. And you're really, really happy because you're comparing this to other genres, and it looks great. But until you know the Candy Crush numbers, okay, which is a peak where it's out of 72%, you can't understand how far off you are. And so KPIs in every business, but especially in the game business, is pure gold. And it's the one thing on the internet ecosystem that is critical for you to know whether you're focusing on the right thing or not. Right? If you're making 30 cents a day in a specific genre, there's no point of working on monetization because the best games in the genre are 30 cents. But if you're making 10 cents and you think it's great, you can make $1, then you've got to spend all your time on monetization. And so just loving data and investigating data and trying to understand what competitors' data is and relating to it, that's a critical thing. And so once we get to the point that there's KPIs, a big part of my evaluation is on KPIs and on understanding where it is. And then the last stage is the scaling stage. And at the scaling stage, that's the stage where the company's ready, generating enough revenues, that the investment is basically to grow more. And as I said, there's not that many great opportunities like that, but still. And at the scaling stage, the question that I ask myself is, will more money make this a better company? Because the answer is not always true, right? And so sometimes there's a game where you can't double down more on marketing because the users are too far spread away, or because you cover the industry enough, or whatever. Sometimes there's a company where more money is just going to ruin it. And so at the last stage, I look at KPIs, I play the game, I look at the team, but I also ask myself the question, the tough question: do I really believe that giving them more money is going to make it successful? One of the ways to test it, by the way, is for me, and I've done it in the past, is I would lend them a few $100,000, and I would tell them, we're not going to peak market. We're going to do peak marketing as if you now have a lot more money. And I want to see whether this peak marketing is actually generating the same ROIs that you show me right now. If the answer is yes, great. I want to do, that I would take an option to investment. But if the answer is no, then I know that maybe they're great, but they can't scale much more, right? And so one of the things that I'm seeing today, which is interesting, is I'm seeing more and more and more investing vehicles in games that start to understand that and start to look at combined models of equity and debt, of ROI-driven and KPI-driven investing, which is very different than normal ventures. So that's that. What's the winning team? And I don't want to talk a lot more, so later on, when I'm going to finish a bit more, and then we're going to open to discussion. So the winning team, I think I've said it before, it's a mixture of creative people with numbers people that has a DNA of optimizing, that has a DNA of being data-driven, that has enough skill to build a great product, but also that enough energy charged in them so that they can churn away many, many games or many versions of a game until they hit it right, and then when they hit it right, they double down on it. And I've got so many of my games companies that have exactly the same story. They've started, and the first game was okay, and the second game was okay, and the third game was okay, and then the fourth game suddenly hit, and when it suddenly hit, the good ones managed to turn it into a huge company, and the bad ones just saw it right and fall. And sadly, there's tons of these. And the ones that I'm looking for are the ones that I think have the capability to basically take advantage of that. So that's the team. I hardly ever would invest in a games company where the core founders do not come from the games industry. What I found out is that there is very, very, very little capability of people to transform their knowledge in SaaS or even in social networks or into games companies. Now, of course, that's a bit annoying because when you look at it, you're saying, does that mean that there's no chance for somebody not from the industry? And so the answer is that I do invest in young teams that didn't do anything before, right? But it's the fact is that I feel that most of the education and the speed or slowness that people get in other companies would make them very bad games entrepreneurs. And so taking somebody from another industry and say, hey, why don't you start a games company? That hardly ever works. So somebody new who's a gamer, who has the right energy and the right basic core talent, great. Somebody that's experienced in games, even better. Somebody that comes from another industry, very, very tough. One last thing about the team. I'm looking for something today which is, I think I'm probably the only person that thinks about, well, I don't know many people that think about games like that, but I truly believe that developing a game is a very, very methodological, data-driven process. And I do not believe that developing a game is sitting for a year and a half, doing creative stuff and not knowing whether your game is going to work or not. I'm the last person in the world that's going to allow my teams to sit for a year and a half, bet on something, and then see what comes out. Okay? And the reason is that why would you ever want to put your money or your life for a year and a half into something that you have no idea whether it's going to succeed or not. And so, just like in any other company, I wanted the process to be data-driven, and I wanted to be very iterative and very close to the customers. So what did that mean? I'll give you an example from my two partners in the Valley. They had a games company called Wonder Hill that they merged with Kabam. So Kabam's basically second largest game ever was a game that they developed, and then they merged to Kabam. And they have a phenomenal story, which I have many, but their story is like far better than mine, so I'll use theirs, on how they chose which game genre to develop. And so what they said is, and this is of course extreme, but you'll understand in a second what I mean. What they said is, we think that everything starts from the name of the game. Okay, that's a bit of a, and I said, okay, so what did you do? And said, so we looked at all the good names, and all the good names were this of that, World of Warcraft, League of Legends. And they said, so we figured out that we need to be also a this of that. Okay. And said the best this of that we liked was this being a thing and that being a place. I said, okay, so how does that work? I said, so we made a list of the top 25 things that we thought that people may like. So we did warriors, and we did dragons, and we did whales, and we did aliens, and the 25 things. And then we took the 25 places that we thought could be exciting to people. So Moon, and Mars, and outer space, and Atlantis, and Africa, and then we created a banner for each one of the combinations. So we had a banner for snakes of the moon, and we had a banner for aliens of Europe, whatever, and which is of course true. And then they said, and then we put it out on Facebook, and we basically tried testing what do people click on, and the art basically represented the name. And said from all of our trials, what we found out is that the best thing in terms of place that worked was Atlantis, and the best thing was Amazons. And so we went out to develop a game called Amazons of Atlantis, but then our top server guy looked at us and said, you guys are nuts. People clicked on it because they thought it's a porn site. Amazons of Atlantis. They wanted to see something else. And so we were not sure it's right, but we didn't want to take the risk. So we took the second top thing, which was dragons, and we developed a game called Dragons of Atlantis, which at the peak reached $180 million revenues a year as a game, and we're talking about years back. And by understanding that it's Dragons of Atlantis, that clearly led to a certain genre, that clearly led to, and so, now this is of course slightly overdoing it on deciding your genre based on this, I don't want that. But my methodology to developing a game is as mathematical as that. And what I look for teams that can do that. And so when I develop a game, the first thing I ask people is, what are your references? Okay, because let's face the reality, all the greatest games companies that we all work and like, none of them invented anything. Okay, there's reference to every game mechanism that they have. Every game you'll show me, I can take you back 25 years and show you where the game loops come from. And in many cases, I can take you hundreds of years backwards and show you where in real life games the mechanisms come from. And so the first thing that I ask every game company, or I want them to do, I want them to tell me what's their references. What are the references in traditional games and video games, and what are the references that they're relying on? The second thing is I want them to answer the next question. What are you changing from the reference? Here's a great game. What are you changing? And once I know what they're changing, I ask myself the following question. I say, okay, how can we test that this change from a working reference is what people want? I also ask myself, are they changing too much? So that I don't want, in general, in products, what you don't want huge changes. You don't want the changes to be like, I'm changing now 90% of the reference. You want to say, I understand, here's the reference, and here's the 10%, here's the 15% that I'm changing. Because if you change too much, you lose the reference. You're no longer related to the reference. And then what I want very fast iterations. And I want a very, very early playable that will go to core testers. And I want a very iterative process. And I want to launch the game way before it's worthy of launching in 1 or 2 markets. And I want to start iterating on that and seeing. And then people tell me, but we're shy of putting out something that looks so bad. And I say, how many users do you think you're going to get in the Philippines? 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000? So you just upset 100,000 potential customers in the Philippines. Average lifetime bill in the Philippines, $4 or $5. You just lost the potential of $50,000 of revenue for the entire year. Right? You lost nothing. And so reality is that putting it out and iterating fast around it and doing it with the logical way that is reference-based is the way to develop games today. And choosing your name in a smart way and using what we call vaporware testing, meaning putting out things to test that you don't really have yet. These are all tools that I use in each one of my companies. But on games companies, it's things that I want more and more and more. And the problem, of course, is that many of the games companies that come to me actually are the opposite. They say, I actually want to be very creative. I want to do, I have this dream. It's going to take me 2 years to build now. Why don't you give me $10 million to build that? I'm like, sure. Yeah, and I'm going to sit back for 2 years and see what comes out. That's not the way to invest in games today. So that's about that and about the winning teams. Smart risk taking, we spoke about that. I don't know what it means. And then what are the trends? So what are the things that I'm going to invest in today in games? So let's start from a few. So the first thing is that right now investing in mobile games is almost impossible. The reason is that all of you guys are spending so much money with these guys and others that for a small young company is becoming almost impossible to win right now. And so investing in mobile games today for me would be based on a bunch of things. Either a phenomenal team that comes with a very clear idea where I can see the references and understand exactly what they're trying to achieve, and where I know that with their execution skills, they're going to get it right, and they're going to get it going. This company called Mitosis that I invested in New York, that's a team from Rising Tide, they're probably the best execution team I know. It's a small scale, small startup. And they chose a genre that they're going to go after. And I know they're going to get a great game. I know it's going to be very high production quality. I know that they're going to test it to death. I know that they're going to optimize it to death. I know that they're a very desirable team. So, we already got offers to sell the company before we even put out the game. So that's a decent event. They may not become Supercell or any other desirable company, but this is still a worthy investment thesis. That's one thing. The second thing in mobile games is I'm going to invest only based on KPIs. I'm going to invest only based on looking at numbers and seeing that the numbers, A, are great. They need to be phenomenal, not great. B, I believe that it's scalable, so that if I pump more money into it, it's going to grow. And I think that the team is scalable, right? So that's the only two things I can invest in mobile games today. So what else do I do in games? I look at new platforms. So as I told you, I've invested in Volley, and Volley is right now making money from Amazon Games. Now it's a bit misleading because right now, if you're building great Alexa games, Amazon is paying you money. So that's fairly easy. It's like Amazon's paying you for every session because it helps them train Alexa, it helps them bring up Alexa usage, and of course, at a certain point, they're going to just pull that off. But we're aware of that, and they're at the cutting edge of this. They also were at the cutting edge of messenger-based games. So not the games that you play in Messenger as a platform, but text-based games. And then they found out through data and through research, and through both of their games running both on Alexa and on Messenger, they found out that the conversion is much better on Alexa and that the ability to actually get people to play the game much better on Alexa using voice. And so that's one games company that I'm looking at. I'm looking at a bunch of VR games companies. Again, I think that we're not there yet, but the time is nearing. Probably the end of 2018 is where it's the right time to start investing in VR companies, but I keep track of all the good teams, and I keep track of everybody and whatever they're doing, and I play all the games to make sure that nobody's like a breakout that I'm going to miss. A similar thing with AR games. I'm not talking about Pokemon Go, I'm talking about real AR games. And the world in which eventually we can play a game that feels very real, using either our phone or real AR goggles, which again, they're going to start appearing in 2019, so that's probably slightly later than VR games. And so all these new platforms are things that I'm looking at, and I'm quite sure that they're going to see billion-dollar companies. History proves that in each one of these platform revolutions, hardly any of the previous winners on the previous revolution managed to become the winners in the new platform. I mean, for me, the thing that I'm the most proud of in my two largest gaming successes, which are Playtech and Clarion, is that both of these companies managed in a phenomenal manner to make the transition from good Facebook companies to great mobile companies. But I will be frank and say that I think that the reason they managed is because none of them became large enough on Facebook to be complacent. So their base on Facebook was not such that allowed them to kind of, mobile will get there where we want it. And so both of them needed the crazy growth, and so they moved to mobile. But when you look at what happened to Zynga, right, they were great on Facebook, they knew that mobile, they heard everything, they just couldn't make the transition. And I believe that the same thing's going to happen for mobile games when it comes to these new platforms, and so that's a new area of focus for me, these new platforms. So these are the trends. In terms of additional trends in games, I think that the way these devices are, mobile devices, they're just getting better and better and better, and so clearly we're going to see higher and higher quality in terms of production, in terms of games, what you need on these devices, so we all feel this, I don't need to tell you this. I'm not a huge believer in mobile consoles. So, the Switch is great, I love it, it's a fun thing, but I don't think it's ever becoming a mainstream thing. And so, yeah, you can make some money on it, yeah, it's going to be great. Yeah, there's going to be kids that are going to love it, but we're not going back to the days of separate game consoles on the go and on mobile. These days are gone. I mean, I love the team, and I've had a Switch for years, and I was one of the first. It's great, but it's really not going to be a platform that's going to be around like mobile, and not even like VR. Right? VR, there's powers to be that are pushing VR to our world that are much stronger than the power that are pushing standalone game consoles. So I wouldn't focus time on that in terms of trends. That's about it. So I spoke a lot more than I intended to, which happens to me quite often. Do we have time for a few questions?
Yes.
Okay, so we have time for a few questions. Not everybody together, but if you have any question about anything, about entrepreneurship in general, yes?
So you talked about a specific tipping point from which the business needs to be consolidated and invest a lot of its resources into doing the one core thing that shows the signal of success.
Yep.
How do you identify that this is what you experience? How do you know?
So the question is, let me generalize the question, because this is a general entrepreneurship question rather than, and the question is basically, how do you know that you've just hit what's called the product market fit? Okay, that's the question, and I have a few answers to this, but the real one is a sentence that I once heard in Silicon Valley, and I just love, and the sentence says, if you're not sure that you have product market fit, the answer is that you don't have it. And so when you have it, everything changes. When you have it, then your KPIs suddenly look completely different. Your marketing attempts look completely different. What it feels like, if I need to explain it, I've had it in many companies, but what it feels like is instead of you trying to show your product into the users, which is the way all of us live our lives in general, you suddenly feel that somebody grabbed you by the nose and is pulling you. You feel that the numbers are just going off the charts. We used to say in the past that your servers are melting, but now it's Amazon, so they can't really melt. But you start seeing that the scale is just requires some attention. And so that's the general question. The specific one is that a games company or any entrepreneurial company today needs to be so data driven that it is impossible to miss out on the question of, do I see a change or not? And so what I tell people is that if you need to know at every stage of your company, you need to know what are the 4 or 5 KPIs that measure your business. And then, you know, when I wake you in the middle of the night, and I ask you what these KPIs are, and you tell me there's 20, it means that you're not doing your job right. It needs to be, you know, MMO strategy. I'm like, okay, I wonder how that's going to work. But there's like all these mashups of all the genres, and they're a way to find maybe blue oceans. But even then, you get it right, someone's going to replicate you. It's the machine and the ability to put all the energy behind it that's going to matter. Yes?
I actually have 2 questions. The first one is how to usually structure product market fit for the game business, because it's not about just one product, but a portfolio game. And also, the second question is how do you usually see the difference between the skill set required of the founding team like before and after the product market fit point?
So the question on understanding product market fit in the games company. So games company is really complicated because unlike other companies, when I look at it, you need basically both product market fit for the first game, but you also need the methodology to replicate that again and again and again. And so your entire, you know, the toughest point in a games company's life, well, the first tough point is to find that first hit, the first game. The second toughest is to double down on that game and know when and where. But the toughest one, at the end of the day, is basically to be able to scale from a single game company to a multi-studio company. And this is where some of the best companies have failed. And so, you know, you need to find people that have done it before, and you need to basically, you know, get people that can help you. And so I think the best games companies out there, one of the indicators is that when they near that position, they got either new employees involved, which also relates to the talent question, new executives involved, that were involved in multiple studios rather than one product, and they got advisors to help them on that. And I think that for the founding team, there's nothing tougher, and I see it now with one of my companies, there's nothing tougher than the CEO waking up in the morning and having only one game to think about. And so he's like the GM of the studio. That's what he does. He is managing one game studio. Suddenly there's another project, and suddenly he's all lost. He's all lost because he can't put the same attention on the one game, but he feels that if he doesn't put the more attention on the new game, it's not going to work. And so it requires structural change. It requires bringing in a different set of talent, people that are more, so you need, at the next game studio, you need the same kind of talent, entrepreneurial, fast, iterative, but then at the corporate level, which, you know, the fact that I call it corporate level just indicates how bad it is, but at the corporate level, you need people that have seen more than one line of product or one game studio work together. Yes?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, I guess that everybody knows that this is a tech-driven industry and everybody is chasing the success, but failing is part of the process. When we should know that we are failing a lot in order to find that success?
So it's a great question, and again, it's you know, everybody in games thinks that we're unique, but just like everybody in every other industry thinks they're unique. So the same question applies for any other product. And the principle at the end of the day is 2 things. The first thing is to fail fast, right? So deciding when an iteration fails, deciding when a game is not doing well, is the most important thing. Because the one thing that all of us have the least of is time. It's not money, it's time. And so wasting, usually when do you start a company? You start a company when you're relatively young, your best years in life. And if you're going to waste them on something that's not good, then that's failing, that's pretty much miserable. And so you need to have the mentality of failing fast. You need to have the mentality of saying, I'm going to give myself KPIs again, finding what's the KPIs in the industry. I'm going to give myself KPIs, and if I don't meet them, I'm out of here. I'm not going to stay here. So that's one thing. I think that the second thing is that you really need to be harsh. You really need, and in this, what I found out is that it's the relationship between the founding teams that allow people to tell each other their true feeling. Because there's always somebody that knows the truth. Right? And many times you're blinding yourself. You're in love with the product, you're in love with what you're doing, you're in love, or you're afraid to admit. But there's always somebody that knows. And so this open communication in the founding team is what helps you understand that this is really not working, right? And I really encourage all of you, I think that one of the best pieces of advice that I got in the past about games is that, and then I took it to other industries, is that the toughest thing in the games company is not to decide what game to develop, it's to decide what game to stop developing. Right? All the game companies that basically went bankrupt were not necessarily those that didn't have successful games. It's those that continued spending millions and millions of dollars on developing or promoting or pushing games that never had a chance to really succeed. Where in a real view, you could have analyzed that. And so I pride myself that in all my games companies, there's probably 2 canceled projects for every project that goes live. Why? Because if that's not the case, it either means that you've hit geniuses that never make mistakes. I never met these type of people. Or that you're just spending your money in the wrong place, and your attention and the management attention and so on. So remember, it's an indication that if you're not killing games in a multi-game companies, or if you're not doing like hard decisions and hard iterations on your single game, you're probably not doing the most that you can do. Guys, last question if anybody has, and then I need to leave. It's even better. So thank you very much.